Good evening, everyone. Today is Wednesday, January 15th, 2025. The time is 4:34 p.m., and I like to call the Finance Committee meeting of the Frederick County School Board to order. And Board, we have a agenda before us. How would the Board like to proceed?
I move that we approve the agenda before us.
Second. So we have a motion on the floor. It's been properly seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Dr. Hummer.
All right. Thank you so much, Madam Chair. Good evening, everybody. We have 5 items for you this evening. I'm going to start off with the first item and go over our budget timelines. We are jumping into the first phase of our budget process where we are going to be presenting my needs-based budget to you on Tuesday, and we wanted to provide you with a brief overview of the budget process, as well as giving you an overview of where we are with the budget. We're also going to be discussing CIP versus CAP, and those 4 items are for information only. Of course, we want to entertain all of your questions during that conversation. And then we have one action item, which is a notice of federal interest for the 2 projects that we used ESSER federal dollars for construction at Middletown and Armel. So we do have a document before you that needs to go to the full board for approval. So if there's no questions about the agenda, I'm going to dive into 2 budget timelines that I want to share with you. The first is going to be our local timelines. So as I mentioned to you all, I'll be presenting my needs-based budget to you on Tuesday. That'll be a very in-depth and complex conversation. That presentation will be up here shortly. I know that Mrs. DeSantis is working on posting that. So you all, as well as the public, will be able to see that presentation before Tuesday. We will then have a public hearing on February 4th. Due to the space issues that we've had here over the course of our last couple meetings, we are going to be hosting that next door, James Wood Middle School, and that is going to be an opportunity for the public to add their feedback and input on the budget for you to take into consideration. We are then looking forward to a budget work session, joint work session with our Board of Supervisors, which we've done over the last 2 years, which we felt was very valuable. We had a lot of great in-depth conversations about where we're at with our budget, where we're at and how that factors into the county budget, so we're able to make those necessary changes and decisions before you all adopt the budget on February 18th. Now, once you all adopt my needs-based budget, you all can make changes prior to that point. But after that point, the changes will have to come after the Board of Supervisors makes their decision, because we send that downtown to them to take into consideration to loop into their appropriation across the county. So that's why that's important that we get all that information to you and get that across the street so that they can advertise for the tax rates and all the other aspects of the appropriation of the budget. They will then hopefully adopt the budget in April, which I'll dive into the state code in regards to when budgets should be adopted and approved here on the next slide here in a second. And then once they adopt it or approve it, then it'll come back to you all for conversation for approving, making adjustments, so on and so forth, based on their appropriation. Before that meeting in April where you all approve it, we will have another joint work session with all of the school board. Okay, so we'll be able to discuss all the items that are currently in the budget, items that we might have to shift or take out because of the appropriation of what we're given from the county. So we are going to have numerous conversations throughout this entire process. These are just the main milestones as we work throughout this, but we're going to have meetings with our Finance Budget Committee. We're going to have 2 work sessions with our board. We're going to have 1 joint work session with the Board of Supervisors. And then it's also been customary that I go downtown and provide another final presentation to them in March as well. So we're going to have a lot of conversations, rich conversations, and we strongly advise you to ask questions. This is for every board member. Please send their questions along. If there's things that you want us to consider or change or shift or what have you, please send us those questions because we want to answer those, and we greatly appreciate that. Also, as I mentioned to you, there are 3 You can go to the next slide. Thank you. There are 3 codes to become familiar with. I've shared these with you last year in regards to when these budgets are due per state code. The first is that we have to submit our budget to the Board of Supervisors, the governing body, by April 1st. May 15th is when the governing body has to adopt the K-12 budget, but it can be delayed up to 30 days after receipt of the estimated state funds. That is a part of this process as well. As you know, over the last probably 5 to 10 years, that the local budgets have never aligned with the state budget because the state always takes their time to finalize their budget. But if the state does wind up giving more money after the budget's appropriated, we will then have conversations with downtown about how to utilize those dollars. And if you recall, last year that happened, and we took some of those money to purchase additional staff, but we also gave money back to the county. And that was in good faith to show that we're being good stewards of our dollar, and we're trying to work through this process collaboratively. The last one is June 30th, and that's the deadline for the local governing body to set the tax and to approve their local budget. So those are codes that we have to abide by per state code. So if there are no questions about those dates, I'm now going to hand it over to Ms. Anderson and her team to give you an update on the budget process and the overview. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Welcome. So first, we'll kick this off with just talking about the scale of our organization, giving you some facts. We continue to be the largest employer in Frederick County. We're approaching almost 2,600 full-time equivalent positions, and we have moved from 19th to 18th largest school division in the state of Virginia. We're projected to have a student enrollment of just over 14,800 students with us next year. And of course, we manage just over a third of $1 billion across 12 different financial funds. So we'll spend a lot of time talking about the operating fund, which captures the day-to-day operations of running a school division. Our sources of funds predominantly come from the state, 50%, as well as the county through a local required match of 46%. We get about 4% from the federal government, which this percentage is more in line with normal operations because the ESSER dollars have expired. And this 4% federal funds are designed to supplement our instructional programs for students with specific needs. And how those funds are spent in our operating fund, 75% of it goes to instruction. 9% of it goes to taking care of our facilities. We have 21 campuses. And 6% goes towards transporting students to and from school every day. And then 5% for technology, and the remaining 5% is everything else. That includes student health services, administration, and transfers to other funds to purchase things like textbooks, as well as support the school nutrition operation. Another way to look at how our operating funds are spent is we're a people-intensive business. We're a system of people. 83% of our operating funds go towards the salary and benefits for our staff. 17% is everything else. So the development of the superintendent's proposed budget, which you will hear next week, doesn't happen in a silo. We have a number of planning and guiding documents that we use. Of course, the school board budget priorities, as well as our staffing standards, our capital asset plan to schedule facilities maintenance, as well as our strategic plan. We also seek input from advisory committees, the superintendent's town halls, as well as parent organizations, and our staff, teachers, principals. The budget committee is involved, and of course, the superintendent's cabinet level. You've seen this statistic before. This is a benchmark measurement where we fairly compare ourselves to local school divisions, what we call the cost per student. All school divisions have to report expenditures annually to the Virginia Department of Education in a unified standardized format. And as you can see here, Frederick County, we're the green bar. We continue to be lower than both the state and the regional averages. We shared this line graph with you during our fall retreat. Our teachers' pay scale gets a lot of attention because they are our greatest group of staff. Here you can see our teacher bachelor scale compared to the 30-mile school division radius. And that's not just Virginia. It also includes school divisions in West Virginia and Maryland within 30 miles. So in this comparison, our teacher scale, we're doing fairly well. But it's important to note that our exit interviews, when teachers leave us, West Virginia and Maryland aren't really our competitors. So with that in mind, going back to our traditional survey group, looking at the Virginia localities within a 30-mile radius, these are the school divisions that we compare to. So here's what that line graph looks like. Frederick teacher scale is the blue line and the numbers in red, and then the survey group average is the orange line. So we fare very well when you look at 25 and more years of experience, and that was intentional. If you recall, this year's budget, we had the initiative of 5,000 additional pay for teachers with 25 or more years of experience. Again, that's designed to keep our seasoned teachers with us. But we have some gaps there in other areas of the scale. And again, this is data points that we use to arrive at a salary initiative for the budget proposal. We were grateful to be able to increase our teacher pay scale to $52,000 this year from $50,000 the previous year. The governor also provided a 3% salary initiative this year for all school divisions. And as you can see, while we were able to improve our starting salary, we weren't able to improve our rank in terms of starting salary. So while we were increasing our pay scale, so was everyone else. Here's a comparison of our pay scale to Loudoun County. We're not trying to be Loudoun County, but we can't ignore Loudoun County. 31% of our staff left us for Loudoun County. So we just spent time talking about the teacher scale. We also look at our other pay scales in comparison to the 30-mile Virginia group. And here you can see how our bus driver pay scale from the minimum and the maximum hourly rate fares. We also did the same for our school security officers. You can see the comparison here, but I do want to make mention that the sample size is lower. We could only get data from Warren, Fauquier, and Loudoun County. And here's how our instructional assistants compare. Again, these are data points that we use to arrive at a salary proposal. Just some terminology. As we move through the budget process, you'll hear us talk about full-time equivalent positions. And really, that's just to differentiate between a full-time employee and a part-time employee. So for example, our school nutrition workers, a full-time school nutrition worker works a 7-hour day, so they're a 1 FTE. If we have a 5-hour school nutrition worker, they're a 0.7 FTE. So as you hear the superintendent's proposal next week, it'll be based upon the governor's budget proposal for the state because it's the best information that we know at this time as the state moves through their budget process. So the state budget, how schools are funded, is based on the standards of quality, which are the minimum educational requirements. The cost of the standards of quality are then apportioned between the state share and a locality share. And that is separated based on a locality's ability to pay for education. So the wealth of a locality is based on the 3 economic indicators you see there true value of real property, adjusted gross income, and taxable retail sales. So the point is, as our LCI increases, our state dollars decrease. And here's just an illustration of how the SOQ and the LCI work. You take an SOQ funded teacher at $50,000 a year, the local share based upon our local composite index of 41.51%. You can see the local share there, as well as the state share. So now I'm going to switch gears and I'm going to move to debt service to talk about our obligations through debt service. The first bar for fiscal year 25, you can see that the money that we get from the county is $20.4 million to pay our debt obligations. The county funded us this year between their general fund and some money from their capital fund. That's important because the capital fund is considered one-time funding. So you move to fiscal year 26, next year, our debt obligations in total are actually going down to 19.6. However, because this year was funded partially from one-time funds, we'll need an addition of $1.5 million from the either the county's general or their capital projects fund. And then you can see in the out years, our debt will be increasing because of the construction projects that we are taking on. You'll also hear us talk about the staffing standards in the budget proposal. The standards drive the number of staff per building or classroom. And we use this tool, obviously, to best meet the needs of our students, as well as apply a uniform and transparent process for our staffing decisions. And it does help us to streamline the budget. We analyze the standards and update them annually. And this year is our second year phase-in of this staffing standard tool. The budget calendar, you heard Dr. Hummer talk about some important dates earlier in the presentation, but I want to draw your attention to February 13th, which is a school board meeting. It is your budget work session before you submit your budget proposal to the county. We'll have a number of finance committee meetings between now and April as the budget process unfolds. And now we want to jump into a quick preview of the budget proposal. Cost of a salary increase for all our staff, at minimum to provide a 2.5% COLA, our cost is $4.3 million. The governor's budget, he has included a 3% compensation initiative for both instructional and support staff. So that for us is a $5.2 million number. We have 5-year salary goals. We want to, over time, remove the years experience clusters on all our pay scales. What that means is you could have multiple years on one pay level, and that happens either because we did not receive funding for salary increases or the funding wasn't enough to advance employees a step movement. We also want to cap our pay scales at 30 years of experience. We want to provide a competitive starting salary and offer competitive increase for our most experienced staff and implement an annual cost of living each year. For perspective, here is what the cost would be to uncluster the teacher scale in 1 year, $10.9 million. So we know that that's not realistic to happen in 1 year because all of our pay scales also have years of experience clusters. And other items to consider related to salaries. We want to further the expansion of the $5,000 extra pay for our experienced teachers. We want to be attentive to the starting teacher salary to compete. We want to continue the removing of years of experience clusters. We want to address special education pay to help recruit those hard-to-fill positions. And then we want to look at our instructional assistants and our school security officer pay scales. So if there are no questions to this point, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Goodwin.
Before we do, I'd like to just shine a spotlight on a few things. So
Sure.
keep the clicker handy because I want to refer back to a few
Will do.
slides. Could you go back to slide number 9, please?
Slide number 9. You might have to stop me because I don't see a number.
You're at 27, keep going.
Yep.
Okay.
It's right at the very, well, 9, the very
Close to the
beginning where it
beginning.
talks about the sources of information that Dr. Hummer uses to put his budget together. I
Good.
just want to
I'm with you.
point something out on that slide.
12, 11, 10.
That's it.
All right.
Right there. So just want to call everybody's attention to the one bubble on there that says advisory committees, town halls, and parent organizations. So again, I think as everybody knows, I am a power to the parents kind of person and parents' rights. This is where you can have not only meetings such as this, where you get information, in the school board meetings where you can actually voice your opinion, but you can come to any of these meetings and become part of these committees that we've just spun up. So looking forward to getting into those. And voice your opinions and let us know your concerns. So I highly advise everybody who's listening out there to try to attend some of those meetings and give us your genuine feedback. So just a little public service announcement there. Also, too, if you could go to slide 17, please. I just want to touch briefly on the difference between school security officers and school resource officers. Because there's a lot of amazing photos on here of our SROs, our school resource officers. So just for the public's clarification, because I had the same question as well, school resource officers are our deputy sheriffs that are deputized from Lenny's department, Lenny Mulholland's our sheriff's department. They are genuine deputies, sheriff's deputies. And then we also have school security officers who are retired police officers who come back and love kids and want to still serve. So two different work groups there. So thank you.
Yep.
Also, and then slide 18, just one more. Instructional assistants. Okay, so I get a lot of comments from the community about, first of all, what is an instructional assistant? And then I have people in the community that go, well, why should we incentivize instructional assistant salaries? Why don't we keep them where they are? And the incentive would be for them to go get the credentialing to become a teacher. And valid. So I asked that question. And unfortunately, a problem that we continually have is getting substitute teachers because teachers do get sick. They are human. That happens. And we have to have substitute teachers ready to step up. We cannot get enough qualified substitutes. So therefore, our instructional assistants are going from being that teacher's aide type of position to being substitute teachers. I like that idea because anecdotally, I've heard from some substitutes in the county that are like, oh yeah, it's great. I just go in and put a video in and show it to the kids. I don't like that. Whereas our instructional assistants are more plugged into the actual curriculum and they know what's being taught. So just a little clarification there. Hence the pay bump. We need to incentivize this position because they are doing more. Two more real quick. Number 22.
You might have to guide me
20, 21, one more.
there. There you go.
Okay,
Thank you.
how SOQ, the local funds versus the state share. So as many of us, probably all of us, who own property here in Frederick County, our assessments were massive this year. Like, love it or hate it, it is the result of a growing community. The good news is your property values are going up. The bad news is your assessments are going up as well. So just to give everyone kind of manage expectations here, chances are the local share of an SOQ funded position is going to go up. So we don't know how much, but we do know that it's pretty safe to assume that it will. So, and then the next slide, number 23. Okay, so this slide here, I was confused, and I'm sure if I was confused, other folks were confused too. So a huge thanks to the Board of Supervisors for coming in and giving us that extra funding for fiscal year 2025. This is a matter of which bucket it comes out of. So it came out as Ms. Miss Anderson, gosh, drew blank. I was looking at Miss Jordan, saw Miss Anderson. As Miss Anderson pointed out, we did get that funding, but it came out of the capital fund, which is a one-time burn. It's a one-time ask, it's a one-time give. If it had come out of the general fund, that's a standard recurring ask. So our debt has gone down, but we still need funding either from one of those two funds, and that will be up to the Board of Supervisors to determine which one. Also, too, I want to foot stomp here, too, that we are not, I've had other folks come to me in the community and say, well, if you guys want all these projects, if you want all these schools, why don't you save money like the rest of us? Well, we're not allowed to. As a public entity, we are not allowed to save money. So that's why we are beholden to our appropriating authority. For us, it's the Board of Supervisors. So just another foot stomp to bring that back, foot stomp on that fact to bring that back up into the limelight that unfortunately we are not permitted to save money. So, okay. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. CIP, CAP, but not NAP. So no naps today for anyone as we do this presentation. Just wanted to make sure. No particular reason. Members of the board, members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity we have to talk with you. Each year we talk about our budget. We try to explain the difference between CIP and CAP, two very different things. CIP is our capital improvement plans. We've been talking about that a lot lately. Typically those are additions, renovations, and things like that. But we also have CAP. Those are our smaller projects, taking care of the buildings. You can think of that we already have in our division. So the difference between funds that we use, we have an operating fund. Typically, that's where preventative maintenance costs come from. Capital projects fund would include all those major maintenance projects, so asset replacements. And the construction fund would be the fund that we use for just what it's called, construction, as we build new schools, add additions and things like that, and expansions. Capital asset planning, from a planning standpoint, basically we're just trying to make sure with capital asset planning that we have a healthy school environment. Equipment lasts longer. We don't need as many repairs to the equipment that we take care of, and it actually allows us to provide long-range financial planning if we take care of those things on a preventative maintenance schedule. The difference with that also is preventative maintenance is performed, again, on a schedule, as I talked about, and those are systems that already exist in buildings, such as plumbing, potholes, asphalt sealing, interior finish, things like that. So moving forward with asset replacement defined, that occurs when the equipment or system is no longer operational, it breaks down, or parts are no longer available, or repairs are just not beneficial. It would not cost as much to replace it as it would to repair it. So funds are budgeted in the school budget for those items. Those would be things like fire protection. We talk a lot about boilers, HVAC, playground equipment, bleachers, and things like that. So when we look at prioritization of things that we have on our plans, we always look, number one, at safety. Is it safe? Legal compliance is something else, and you can see the organizations that we have to make sure we follow the rules of there, the EPA, ADA, VDOT, OSHA, things like that. And then we also consider, the cost effectiveness. We try to make sure that we make those level 1 priorities. Level 2, you can see that the system is just about to be obsolete, or that we have a piece of equipment that may be very close to failure. And then level 3, it's more about diminishing effectiveness or an efficiency issue. I just want to go back again to that level 1, very top priority being safety. So when we take a look at the way that we project how much things cost or how much money to budget for each one of these items, SchoolDude is a very common forecasting software that's used by many, many school divisions. We have RS Means Data Construction Estimating Tool to figure out costs for construction. We also look at local cost. What are projects costing in the region, both here and also across the mountain in Region 4 and some of those places, and look down the spine of the Shenandoah Valley as well, down towards our neighboring divisions. And then we conduct architectural engineering studies if necessary. And then we have to also consider, inflation or changes in construction trends, much like we saw during COVID with supply and demand and things like that. Cost went up a lot and are beginning to come back down to pre-COVID areas. So you'll see in just a minute when I invite Brian Davis, our Director of Facility Services, to come up to the podium and walk you through a document you have in front of you. You have your very own capital asset plan that's going to be provided to you. This comes from page 6 in that document, and Mr. Davis will do a better job than I will of just walking you through how the document works. But I just want to point out on this particular slide, when we look at these asset replacement opportunities, the very first things you see are 2 fire replacement systems. Again, remember level 1, safety. And then if you go to the very last item on that list, and these are in a prioritized order, the very last thing you see down at the bottom is cafeteria tables and chairs. Those are something that we would like to have replaced, but of course, safety is our number one priority. That's why fire protection opportunities and fire alarms are there at the top. These are preventative maintenance projects that are funded already. So at Armel, we have some plumbing fixtures for the whole school. Jameswood High School, we have athletics and playground. There's a track resurface that's going to go on at Jameswood High. I realize that's not Sharando High School where the track ran much quicker, as I understand. At Sharando High, we do have plumbing fixtures for the whole school. Indian Hollow, we've done a lot of work there, but there needs to be asphalt repair completed, and that was on purpose to be done after that project was completed. Bass Hoover Elementary School, there's a parking lot and asphalt repair dollar figure there. We've had a lot of parents call and talk to Dr. Hummer and me and the principal and lots of others about some traffic issues and queuing and staging for Bass Hoover, as that school is very much at 100% capacity. So we're trying to use these parking lot asphalt repair dollars in conjunction with also a redesign of that whole loop so that we can bring some relief to the parents, that do attend that school and the families there. That's important to us. And then at NREP, there's a lot of interior finishes with walls and things like that. The total for the fiscal year 2026 projects there, you can see, is $1.5 million. So before we go to the next slide, I was asked to stop here by Ms. Anderson, and I am going to make sure that I invite Mr. Davis, if he wouldn't mind. Mr. Davis, would you go to the podium, please, and just walk our members through the capital asset plan document that they've been provided this evening, and maybe give them a little bit of a head start on how that works.
And Madam Chair, if I may, sorry, that's a little loud there. Before Mr. Davis moves forward, just to let the public know that this will be posted on Board Docs as well, so everyone will be able to see this as well.
Great.
So, thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, committee member, Dr. Hummer, you guys stole the whole presentation, by the way. Even that was what I was going to lead with. But anyhow, so you guys have this in front of you. This is the capital asset plan for next year. Just looking at it really briefly in the table of contents, everything that Shane just said was the top 5 or 6 items there. I'm going to start with the capital funding projects of 2026 and just kind of turn to that page, which is page 5. Is where we'll start. And again, this is the list that Mr. Goodwin has up there now. And these are the high priority preventive maintenance projects that we've identified throughout the county for this upcoming year. Plumbing fixtures at Armel, Jameswood High, the track resurface, plumbing fixtures at Sharando, 2 parking lots, and interior walls at NRAP. You'll notice the cost of the parking lot in Indian Hollow is more than double than it is at Bass Hoover. That's because we're going to expand that lot quite a bit, take curbs out, expand it, make it a little bit larger, and add some parking to it. We'll just kind of move to the next page. Page 6 is a division asset replacements. These are in safety and priority need versus alphabetical. The top 2 are fire alarms at Millbrook and Jameswood Middle School. We'd like to replace those. Now, it's a total of $14,798. I don't expect to get all that. I mean, this is where we'll figure out where we appropriate the money to. Hopefully, we'll start at the top and work through there. The remaining pages here are really scope of work. So if you were to look at Millbrook High School, fire alarm, and then go through the pages to the right, and find the fire alarm stuff, which is page 8 up the top. It'll explain why we're changing out the fire alarm there. So we get a little bit of scope of work on all those projects that are listed in that list. Help to clarify it a little bit better so we get a better understanding. I'm always here for questions. I think you guys know that. So move forward a little bit to go to page 10. This also covers school nutrition asset replacements, so they are listed there, what our school nutritionist is asking for. Those are alphabetical, they're not in priority need, just so you have exposure to that. Page 11 works on the CAP forecast. We have the current year, and then we have a 3-year running forecast here for the preventive maintenance. Turn the page, it's also asset replacements as well. You can kind of see where we're looking at in the future and how we're going to try and repair the schools and keep them maintained as we go. Page 14 has a school nutrition asset replacement, the CAP forecast for that. And then page 15 is a pretty good list, shows you what's in progress and what has been recently completed. So you kind of see how my department and the other departments that are working in this book have kind of progressed through the years. And it continues on the back page. Now, the rest of this book from page 17 on are just where these projects will land. It's by maintenance system, whether it's playgrounds, conveyance systems, boilers, asphalt, things like that. And then if you get to page 31, it lists it by schools. So you kind of get a good breakdown of where the projects are. So the first 17 or so pages are what we're asking for, or what we'd like to do, and the rest of it is some clarification to the projects and where they land for school and things like that. It's a lot to throw at you really quick and then ask you if you got a question, because I think the book was just handed to you.
Madam Vice Chair, if I may.
Yes, sir, go
Yes.
ahead.
In regards to these fire alarm systems at James Wood Middle School and Millbrook High School, how old are the systems that are in there now? Because I can't imagine that they're the original systems. that are in
Millbrook
there.
is original.
It is original?
Yes. I can't speak to the one over here at James Wood Middle School, but it is minimally 15, 20 years old.
Okay, thank you.
So,
Is 20 years about the life cycle of one of those systems?
yeah, the panels start to fail, the wiring starts to crumble, the devices start to fail. So we start seeing that. These two in particular are in need now, so we're looking forward to getting these done.
If I could add for the members as well, this is a great book when you have constituents or someone stop you and say, hey, when is that track supposed to be provided at James Wood High School? I love the way that this book kind of breaks it down by system, and then we've really tried to get tight in our description of what that means, each one of the systems, with a paragraph up front, and then the location, because you can kind of look through there and see what's supposed to happen at that school and also when. And so, of course, if something breaks down prior to the year that's there, sometimes we have to pull it up closer or do that immediately if it's one of those life systems or safety systems or something like that. But our goal is to provide you with a document that's helpful, easy to read, and there's a glossary at the end if you just have extra reading time. But I think this is helpful. I hope it is to you, that you can use it when people are asking you what's going on at each one of our schools.
Definitely, yes.
Thanks. Something.
absolutely.
So I just want to add for folks watching at home, something that is really impressive to me. I just picked a random page, so page 18 of this thing. People want to know where all of this money is going. I have never seen this level of disclosure detail provided the way it is. I'll just read this on page 18. This is interior finishes. Flooring includes replacing vinyl composition, rolled flooring, quarry tile, epoxy flooring, carpet, refinishing gym and stage floors, asbestos abatement. Every single penny that I see you accounting for, you're explaining exactly why it's needed down to the project. And I just want to take a second to recognize how long this must have taken to compile, how much it must take to keep it updated. And as somebody, like the chairwoman said a little bit ago, being a very, very tight steward of the public dollar, I give great credit to the folks who worked on this. And I think the Board of Supervisors will appreciate this very much too.
Thank you. It was a big collaborative effort with the accounting team, finance team, facilities team, and the other teams that work in this book. So I'm glad you guys noticed it. It did take a lot of work. And we tried to get good descriptions here so that it is self-explanatory. you know, Dr. Erskine, you can see the detail that goes into that just for flooring, so.
And the other reason I think it's so important is because when we do have to consider new funding projects as a board, these are just the things that we foresee. You know, these don't include the sudden failure of a boiler somewhere,
correct.
or you know, roof cave in like we had over at the middle school a couple of years ago, and all the water damage. And so it just makes me feel a little bit better, especially as a member of the finance committee, seeing this level of detail projected out, down to the type of flooring we're putting down. It's going to take me, to be honest, it's going to take me some time to really sit down with this book
Okay.
and digest what I'm looking
Sure.
at.
And I'm here for questions on this book. I can funnel them however you guys funnel through. I'm certainly able to answer any question you have.
Well, and just another quick comment, another praise to dovetail into what Dr. Erskine is saying. So I was flipping through here, and I was going to ask, well, what is a network cable renovation? And I'm like, well, I'm going to look and see if I
See,
can
it's
find
in
an
there.
answer. And sure enough, on page 22, it explains, because in my mind, I'm not an IT person.
Right.
Why do we need new cabling? Why? Doesn't make any sense. And then you explain it fully here. Basically, the cabling was from the 1990s and must be upgraded to Cat 6 or later, increasing bandwidth from 100 megabytes per second to 1,000. Makes sense.
Yeah.
We're a technology-driven world, not just school districts.
A lot of data use nowadays.
No, this is excellent. Thank
Great.
you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
great. Okay, any other questions now or in the future, just let me know. Thank you. Good night.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. Thank you, members of the board and Madam Chair. We do have some amazing teams who've worked hard, so thank you. I'm going to pass this back down to Ms. Anderson. Thank you, Ms. Anderson.
Just curious. Yeah.
And I'm going to pass it on to Mrs. Jordan.
This was prior to the current board, but in 2019, the federal government did issue out several grants, including ESSER funds. I know both of you are familiar with the term ESSER funds. Those were grant monies that Frederick County Public Schools accepted. Part of those funds were used for construction projects, specifically HVAC replacement systems at Armel and Middletown Elementary Schools. Since we accepted those funds, the U.S. Department of Education has determined that they could be used for construction, which is what we did, and we did use over the $1 million. Because we used over $1 million of those funds for, oh, I apologize, not sure what I did. There we go, thank you. We are now being asked to file a notice of federal interest for each property, the Middletown Elementary School and the Armel Elementary School. The purpose of this is to ensure that those funds that the government gave to the school system remain with the school system and for the purposes of those ESSER funds. So essentially, these notice of interest, they have to be filed with the land records in Frederick County no later than January 28th of this year. And that way, if we were to move forward and try to sell either property, there would be a notice that the federal government does have an interest. What should have been passed to you is the proposed notice of federal interest that will be filed with the court. And that does indicate the restrictions that would be put on the property, which includes that we would have to keep the property for the purposes within the grant programs. We could not mortgage the properties or put them up as collateral, and we could not sell them to a third party because the government wants to ensure, essentially they want to ensure that those funds, we can't use those funds in compliance with the ESSER grant and then just turn around and sell it to use the funds in a different manner. And so this is being asked, the committee is being asked to move this forward to the board for the January 21st meeting. But I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Ms. Jordan, it's my understanding we just got notified of this in November, right? We took those funds back in 2019, and now they're just like, oh, by the way, we need you to do this past November, right?
That is my understanding. There we received notification. I believe the Department of Education did put out some information back in March, but as far as the division, we did not receive notice from the Department of Education until November.
Okay. And there's no statute of limitations, fine print, such as you must retain this asset for 15 years, 20 years, and then after that point, then you can do with it what you will. It's henceforth and forevermore, right?
There is not. However, I did, in the document that was issued, and it's just a guidance document, but that was issued by the Department of Education. It does indicate that how they calculate the federal interest, and that over time that interest would change based on the value of the property. And so it will, if at any point in time the division decides to sell either property, the federal interest would be calculated at that point in time. I do believe that the way this is written, as time passes, like if we get 20 years down the road, we might not have to pay out the full $1 million. But again, this is just a guidance document.
Okay. And it's also my understanding that as of right now, there's no strings attached to this other than this string that we just were made aware of recently yet, subject to change.
As far as I'm aware, there are reporting strings, but because of how we use the fund, this is the only requirement we have to do. We don't fall under the reporting, but other than those two strings, those are the only ones we've been made aware of.
Okay. Gotcha. Thank you.
Just one follow-up, and if you could just check me on this logic stream to make sure I understand. So previous board voted and committed to taking these funds for this specific purpose, and you're asking that we certify that that is indeed what we did with the money and that we recognize what we agreed to.
Yeah, yes and no. It's not really a certification. It's approving that this notice of federal interest can be filed with land records, which does indicate we took the funds from the ESSER grant, we used it for these properties, and we are subject to these conditions.
Got it. That makes sense. All right. I move the committee forward the notice of federal interest for both Armel Elementary School and Middletown Elementary School, the full board for review with a recommendation of approval.
Second. We have a motion on the table that's been properly seconded. Any discussion?
Just to make sure I understand, and I have no problem saying I don't know and making myself look silly, because if I don't ask now, somebody will ask me later why I didn't. The option would be not to approve this and write really big checks back to the Department of Education, right?
Well, that would be one option, because essentially when we accepted the grant funds, the interest already attached. This is just a requirement we have to do, and if we fail to do it, I would assume that would require us to pay some of that money back,
you
or there
for being
would be
patient
some
with me.
consequences. No, that's a good question, but there would be. I haven't been able to find clarification about what the consequences are, but
I don't want to find out.
Can we just try?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, no. Just. Gimbo. So just kind of an informational point overview. I understand why this is, and you all are the messengers. I'm definitely not shooting the messengers here. This is the problem with federal funds. There always seems to be strings of some form or fashion. This is a small string, but it's a string nonetheless. And what really gives me consternation over this is it's something that was attached to ESSER funds, which are essentially the COVID funds, that's a common other name for these funds. And now we are just hearing about this. And it conveniently was given to us in November. So I have overall consternation. And just for those watching, I did, in my meetings with Mrs. Anderson and Mrs. Camry before she retired, and Dr. Hummer, I did make a request last year for this budget cycle, the operating budget, to have all federal funding removed. I wanted to see what that looked like and how much would we have to ask the county for. So just FYI, it would be $12 million is that number. So I am not in a position right now to recommend that we ask the county for $12 million extra dollars.
Bake sale, maybe?
So, yeah.
No, I mean, in all honesty, it's a perfectly legitimate question, and whether those strings are worth that 4%. And I appreciate you asking that hard question.
Anyway,
Yeah.
with much consternation, I second this, and we have a motion. I should call the question. Motion on the table. It's been properly seconded. Discussion sounds complete. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion passes.
12 million.
I know. I do have just one more comment and more questions for Mrs. Anderson, just one really quick one. I thought I did at least. I put, on slide 15, sorry, Mrs. Anderson, giving your thumb a workout here on that clicker.
Screen's not moving as fast as my thumb.
Oh, that's okay, not a problem.
18, 17, 16, 15.
And 15, okay. So on this slide right here, thank you all for putting this slide in here. And you mentioned too, it's not on the slide, but I just really want to drive the point home. We have 31% of all of our teachers are leaving us and going to Loudoun County. So a lot of constituents come to me and say, one of two extremes. One, we need to increase the salaries to Loudoun County salaries. And then the other extreme is, we're not Loudoun County, we never want to be, never will be, they don't need to be in the calculus. Well, I am somewhere in the middle on that, and here's why. It is a hard fact to not ignore that we have 31% of our personnel going to Loudoun County when it's a very short hop, that many young folks in their 30s, 40s, 50s, or even beyond are okay with driving. So just wanted to drive that point home. That 31% is quite a number. So also, too, to my comment saying that we're not allowed to save funds, a lot of people come to us and say, well, why don't you do it like private schools and raise the money or get a donor? We are happy to take any private donors for the Fourth High School or any other project that we have. I mean, the Mr. Brian Davis High School has a good ring to it, if you'd like to donate. So we have the ability to accept donations and to accept massive infusions of cash for any generous donor who cares to do so in the community. But other than that, we can't save money. It's forbidden by Virginia State Code. So. All right, I am finished.
I add just
I
one
might.
thing here.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
Also, in regards to that, people leaving for Loudoun County, having just retired from Prince William County, now I don't have to keep my mouth shut that that's where I worked. It's not just our county that is losing massive quantities of people to Loudoun County. I know when I worked at Prince William over these past few years, tons of people have left there. Tons of people have left law enforcement in Frederick County. They're all going to Loudoun County, so it's just not because our school system can't keep up, whatever. I just want to make that point that it's not just we who are losing massive quantities of people. Prince William pays very well. They still lost people to Loudoun County, so it's just not us, it's everybody. Thank you.
One other thing about this slide, so one of the things that jumps out at me, especially as a teacher, is somebody who's spent a long time in a classroom. Think about what happens around year 12, year 15, you've hit a stride. You are a veteran teacher with years of experience, a track record of success. You're a good human resources vet with respect to liability and stability. And that's when we see this significant increase in the number of people that we lose and the amount of money that we're talking in this space. That's bothersome to me. Not because I'm less worried about the people at the far right of that in the 25 and the 30 year, but halfway through your VRS career, we lose you. Any other field, imagine losing a brain surgeon halfway through their career. That's something that I think is ripe for more conversation. And even though we have far superior teachers to every other county here in Frederick County, I think that's another reason we need to try to find a way to keep them here, especially at the peak of their career.
Yep, absolutely. Well, if there are no other comments.
And one more comment to piggyback off of that, just in regards to that, your VRS is based on your 3 highest years of salary. So you work here for so many years, you go somewhere else 3 more years, you can get a great bump in your salary, come back here, and it's not going to affect your retirement.
Yeah.
So throw that out there.
All right, if there are no other comments, that concludes our agenda. How would the board like to proceed?
I move that we adjourn this meeting of the Finance Committee.
I second. We have a motion on the table. It has been seconded for adjournment. Any discussion? Seeing no discussion, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. We're adjourned.